One of the best movies I've seen in recent years is this movie on Netflix right now called Nonnas, starring Vince Vaughn and Susan Sarandon. And it's just a masterpiece. It's pitched as a comedy, and certainly it is, but it's so emotionally resonant. I was shocked. And it's basically about this guy named Joey, played by Vince Vaughn, who decides in the aftermath of the passing of his mother and his own Italian grandmother, his Nonna, to start up this restaurant, which is basically populated by real life Italian grandmothers, real Nonas, to give people the chance to experience the sense of family and fellowship and love of Nonas through their food, but also to honor the memory of his own mother and his own Nona. So, given all that, what I want to do at this point is basically describe to you certain key scenes from this movie Nonas, which I found to be especially striking in a really beautiful sort of way. So what you see in terms of the opening scene is that Vince Vaughn's character, Joey, he's just a little kid, right? This is like 40 years from the present day. And basically, you see him waiting in line. So it's a snapshot of his childhood. So he's waiting in line at this Italian bakery along with a whole bunch of other people. There's like music playing in the background. And all of a sudden, the bakery opens. Everyone's excited. They all come in. And basically, you see all these amazing shots of these amazing Italian desserts. And there's this kind of ritual where the Joey character goes up to the counter and asks for bread amongst other baked goods. And there's kind of a familiar back and forth kind of banter. And then he gets the goods and he's walking back home, right? And you see him, walking down the street. He sees his best friend. He sees his best friend's father working on this car, compliments the car. He goes up to his place. There's a party. Everyone loves him. He's immersed in this amazing atmosphere of love. People, they touch his head, they touch his cheek, they touch his arm. And this culminates with him going to the kitchen. And he sees his mother, he sees his Nonna. And basically the mother is making pasta while his Nonna is making the sauce or the gravy. And at first there's this kind of playful thing where they realize that Joey has eaten pretty much all the desserts. And so they kind of playfully chide him and he's about to leave the room. And then he kind of stops and he's kind of wistfully looking at his grandmother make the gravy. And his grandmother notices, and she kind of gestures to the mother. And the mother is like, Joey, do you want to watch your Nonna make the gravy? And so he nods, and basically there's this reverential thing where he's there, he's watching her. She makes him smell this really delicate herb, and then gives him the gravy to taste. And he tastes it, and he says it's perfection. And the Nonna says to him, no, like, you're perfect. And they have this beautiful moment, and it culminates with this saying, one does not grow old at the table. Now, here's why I like that scene. The sense of family, the sense of culture, the sense of deep, rich love, but more importantly, and this was kind of surprising, right? The sense of like intergenerational interconnectedness. I mean, what you often see in the context of film is not only the sense of like the younger generation making fun of the older generation, but the sense of like condescension. Like there's us and there's them, right? There's us and there's you. But not in this film, right? Right from the very beginning, you get the sense that, okay, here's this guy, and he's recalling this past memory, and he recognizes the memory is beautiful. And he's remembering his mother, he's remembering his grandmother, and remembering that they are beautiful. They continue to be beautiful. They're a big part of his life. They always will be. Like, that's just a beautiful thing that, again, you don't often see in film. And this gives rise to the next scene I want to talk about, right? This really amazing scene where Joey is, again, grown up, and he's in a kitchen with this woman that he likes, this woman named Olivia. And they're basically talking about Olivia's friend, this woman named Antonella, who becomes one of the Nonas who works at the restaurant. And at first, the conversation begins with Olivia talking about how Antonella has this habit of like stealing these little bits of butter from the restaurants, these prepackaged bits of butter, taking them home and that sort of thing. So they're kind of joking about that. And then Joey begins to kind of ask her deeper questions, like, you two seem to be really close, like, what's up with that? And then Olivia goes on to talk about her relationship with Antonella, talking about how when she first moved in, she moved next door with her husband, and they were renovating their place, and Antonella was always complaining every single day about the noise. But even when she's saying this with a smile. And then she mentions about how her husband died some years ago. And after that, her relationship with Antonella really came to a head. And so the way she describes it, just to kind of paraphrase, is that, okay, Antonella would come to my place in the aftermath of my husband's death and just be with me, sit with me, make me food, make sure I took a shower. And then she says, that's a special kind of love, right? And she goes on to say that Antonella is always trying to encourage me to, move on, to move my wedding band to the other hand. But gosh, I'm not ready. I'm just not ready for it. And Vince Vaughn's character, the Joey character, he kind of steps in at this point, and he's talking about his mom. And he says, after my mom died, I got this letter from her, kind of post-mortem. And I'm afraid to open it, because I know that if I open up that letter and I read it, in a certain sense, those are going to be the last words that I ever hear from my mom. And then after sharing that beautiful moment, they basically say to each other, like, well, gosh, grief doesn't have a timeline, so why should we? So a lot of times what you see in film is, even if people are grieving the passing of someone like a mother or a grandmother or whatever, it's like pretty quick, and they're over it quickly. And what's interesting about this movie is that, again, it's a comedy, but at the same time, it is really doing justice to the grieving process. Like, throughout the course of the film, the Joey character is clearly mourning the passing of his mother and his grandmother, and he's trying his best to cling to that, trying to honor their memory through the founding of this restaurant. And it's a really beautiful lesson for each one of us, right? Because, oftentimes when it comes to the deep, rich experiences of life, I don't know, maybe because we're not used to it, maybe because society doesn't tend to support it, but we don't really tend to honor the complexity of these things, even though they're so common, they're so rich, they're so emotionally resonant. But here's this film which really drives this point home. Okay, here's the passing of someone you loved. Like, honor that. Honor the memory of this person. Honor what you're going through as well. Recognize that grieving has no timeline, so neither should you. One final scene, I'll kind of end with this, right? So basically, once the restaurant is established, there's a whole bunch of factors which lead it to not be successful, at least in the short term. And so there's a certain point near the end of the film where the collective Nonnas who are working at this restaurant, they're beginning to get a little bit despondent, right? And so the Antonella character gives voice to this sense of despondency by saying, well, look, no one cares about us. No one cares about us. No one cares about our stories. We don't matter. We are simply discarded, and no one will remember us. And one of the other Nonnas argues with her ferociously and basically says to her, well, no, this place, this restaurant, it means something to me. Our work means something. I mean something. And so even though you might say that we're discarded, I don't believe that. But then they continue to argue back and forth. Until finally yet another Nonna says, well, look, I'm ashamed of you. We're not quitters. We are beautiful, strong women with Italian blood. And we've been through too much together to have it all end in anger. And with that, they all hold hands, they all reconcile. And even though the scene plays out as an argument between different characters sitting at the table, you recognize that symbolically it represents the interior struggle for a lot of people as they get older, as they struggle with old age and mortality. Like, on the one hand, I'm thinking to myself, well, gosh, it seems like, based on my immediate experience, that my life doesn't matter, that people don't care about my stories, that I have nothing further to contribute to this world. There's a part of me which believes that. On the other hand, there's a part of me which rebels against that, which cries out against the passing of my youth and my ability to live a vigorous life. And so kind of like, what do I do with that? And that's a topic which is, in a certain sense, a little bit too rich for this really kind of short reflection. But I guess something I want to kind of say to that point that the movie contributes in terms of adding to the conversation is this notion that it's meant to be a shared burden. It's meant to be a shared conversation. And so, yeah, all of us have to struggle in our own way with mortality and old age and whatnot. But at the same time, again, what the film really highlights is that this struggle is not meant to be an isolated one. You're meant to share the struggle, not just with people of your own age, but the entire community. And that's what the founding of the restaurant in the movie represents. It represents possibility. And so even right now, just kind of think it through, right? When you think about the people in your life who are getting older, who are struggling with physical issues, who are perhaps struggling with illness, with the possibility of dying, like, do I truly recognize that these people have intrinsic dignity because they are children of God, which goes beyond their efficiency and functionality? And if I believe that in my bones, and I value these people, how do I communicate that through my words, through my actions? What can I do to honor their stories? What can I do to honor their lives? What can I do to show them that I love you, we love you? If you direct your mind to that particular issue, even for a moment, all sorts of things should come to mind. And that's how it should be. We should be constantly immersed in this dynamic, creative, and powerful love, which calls each one of us to bigger and better things, especially when it comes to the people in my life, our fathers, our grandfathers, our mothers, and our Nonas.